Oh, hello, my friends. This today is Wednesday morning, the 25th of the day of Elul, 21st, I believe, of September. Yeah, 21st of September. And we are continuing now with our classes on Shaar Hagilgulim, the gate of reincarnation or reincarnations. Previously, we had spoken about various levels of consciousness. And we're going to talk about that more today and how they correspond to the worlds. But let's get to the text and we'll see from there what it is that we need to examine. Okay, what we had said previously was that there are 5 levels of soul. The Midrash, that's rabbinic literature, records 5 different names of the soul. We explained that 5 different names of the soul doesn't just mean 5 different synonyms, but rather each one is indicative of a different level of soul, or if you like, a different level of consciousness. We did explain this previously. We said that there are 5 levels of soul, and they are called, from the bottom up, Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, and Yechida. Nefesh is the life force of the body, essentially. Ruach is the consciousness of emotional forces within the person. The person's emotional forces, in other words, emotional consciousness, is the level of ruach. Intellectual or mental processes, the level of neshama. And then chaya and yechida are what are called makif. In other words, they're not clothed within the body per se, but they envelop the person. In other words, they're larger than the person's limitations caused or brought about by the body. Now, the Shaar Hagilgulim had said that a person is not worthy of receiving all levels of soul initially. A person only starts off, she only starts off with a level of nefesh, which is the life force, essentially the life force of the body, which is revealed in our consciousness and our awareness through the 5 senses. The 5 senses correspond to the world outside. In other words, they let in information from the world outside, and that is given to everybody at the time, or mostly it's given to everybody at the time of their birth, with all of the 5 senses. And then one's ability to advance spiritually depends on what it is that we do to metakein, in other words, to rectify and to purify and elevate the various levels of soul. And that's one of the things that we're going to speak about today. Now, we're up to over here when the Arizal now says that Inyan Naran, the concept of Nefesh, Ruach, and Neshama, which is called Chalukah, the Rabbanon, the rabbinical garment, etc. And then he gives a whole bunch of references where this can be found and where it's spoken about in other writings of the Arizal. We will come to those. One of them is in the 4th gate of the Arizal's works. There's another work called Shaar Psukim, which is actually one of the gates, Shaar Psukim, when it speaks about the small jacket that Samuel's mother gave him, and various other places, various cross references, which we don't really need to go in now. So we continue. No, be aware. Kikol hanafashois, all of the levels of soul, the whole concept of nefesh corresponds to the world of Asiya only. And I'm going to show you a chart soon. And the level of ruach, is from the world of Yetzira. This is in a general sense. We'll see more specifically in a minute. And all the levels of neshama, that's the 3rd name of the soul, are from the world of Beriah. And I'm going to discuss the four worlds again very briefly, and then also the levels of soul that correspond to them. Omnam, however, Rov Bnei Adam, the vast majority of people, Ein Lahem Kol Chamisha Chalokim, do not have all five sections. In other words, they don't have Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, Yechida in a revealed way. They only have one part, and then if they are worthy, they get the next part, etc., as he's going to say now. So these are called Narayim, Naran Chulu, Nefesh, Ruach, Neshama, Chaya, Yechida. They don't have all five parts. Rachelik HaNefesh Bilvad, they only receive, at the time of birth, the level of Nefesh, physical awareness, awareness of the physical world, awareness of the world of Asiya. The physical world is the lowest counterpart of the world of Asiya. We're going to go over that in a second. Hashehu Mina Asiya, and that is from the world of Asiya. Aval Gam Bazeh Yesh Madrigot Rabot. Even in this, there are many different levels. Madrigot Rabbi says many different levels in the world of Asiya. Bahu, and it's like this. Ki Hine Asiya Atzma, Asiya itself. Nechlekes v'chamisha partzufim, is divided up into 5 partzufim. Now, what is a partzuf? A partzuf is a sphera or a cluster of spherot, cluster of spheres that works in conjunction with other spheres. The names of the partzufim, which we'll get to shortly, indicate how it is that they work. They're sort of reminiscent of a family relationship. There's a partzuf called Abba, which is a partzuf of Chochmah, Abba meaning father. There's a partzuf of Ima, mother. There's a partzuf of Zun, of Zer Anpin, the small partzuf for the small visage, which is called the sun, and the sun S-O-N. And then there is Nukva, the female partzuf, Malchus, which is the lowest of the partzufim. So those are the 5 partzufim, and they interact like a family interacts. In other words, the son and daughter are given birth to by the mother and father. The mother is primarily the one who's involved mostly in nurturing the lower partzufim, the partzuf of Zer, Anpin, and Malchut, but not exclusively. Chochmah also, Chochmah Abba, the father, also has his role. Now, of course, these are all anthropomorphisms. They're not meant to be taken literally. We're just understanding them in terms of the roles that these play. And again, I'm going to get to a chart and I'll explain it a bit more in detail. So the 5 partzufim are called, I didn't discuss the highest one, Arich Anpin. Arich Anpin is corresponds to Keter, Arich Anpin, the long visage, so to speak. Va'avo, Abba ve'ima, father and mother. V'zun, Zeir Anpin, the small visage, and Malchut. Just close that. And Zun, Nukva, Malchut. So those are the 5. Those are the names of the 5 partzufim. They correspond to a sphera or cluster of spherot, as I've just explained. Zeir Anpin. All of them correspond to one sphera except Zeir Anpin, which corresponds to the 6th sphirot from Chesed to Yesod. Chesed, Gevura, Tiferet, Netzach, Hod, Yesod. And it continues. We'll finish after this paragraph. I'm going to go to the diagrams. But before a person can get to the level of Ruach, which is designated for him, which hopefully he will reach, where his consciousness will be in the world of Yetzirah, that level of soul corresponding to the world of Yetzirah called Ruach. It has to be complete in all of the partzufim of the world of Asiya. In other words, Asiya has to be completely rectified and elevated before a person's consciousness can rise up to a higher level. Okay. Again, I did pause the recording, but I don't know why I didn't pause. We are now going to continue and explain the world or planes of reality and the Parzufim and the levels of soul associated with them. Okay, so first of all, as we all know, there's the Or Ein Sof. The Or Ein Sof, the infinite light, the infinite revelation of godliness. And in order for there to be, for worlds to come about, there has to be a tzimtzum, a contraction, or as we preferably call it, a concealment of the Or Ein Sof, concealment. In other words, that the Or Ein Sof remains where it is. It's not removed per se, but it is simply concealed. So the first world that comes about after that is a meta world, a primordial world called the world of Adam Kadmon. The world of Adam Kadmon, which is a meta world, a world of potential. It's not a world which is actualized, because usually the word for world means something that has been created with limitations. World is from the word he'elem, olam from the word he'elem, meaning concealed or concealment. Alam Kadmon is the highest level of revelation after the Tzimtzum. And therefore, we don't want to call it a world per se, or a created world. It is a world of divine light, but it's primordial. It's a meta world. It's not. It's only in potential. It's not. It doesn't have the same constraints and limitations that the other worlds have. Then we get to the world, the next world down, after further contractions, after further concealment, will be the world of Atzilut. The world of Atzilus, which is the world of emanation, or the world of proximity, from the word Eitzel, meaning close to, or proximity. Finally, we come to the three lower worlds, the world of Bria, which is essentially the world of creation. The word Bore or Bara created, he created. This is where the limitations of time and space, at least in the world of Bria, in a spiritual in the spiritual meaning of time and space, come about. That's called the world of creation, or the world of being. In order for there to be being, so to speak, so there have to be limitations. Infinite being only applies from the world of Atzilut and higher. Certainly in the world of Adam Kadmon, and of course beyond that, beyond the Tzimtzum, there's only infinity. That's all there is, infinite being. Right. Finally, next we get down again after further contractions to the world of Yetzirah, which is the world of formation, the world of form. This is the world that not only is it the world of being, but this is being with its constraints. In other words, this is the world where you would find the beginning of space. In other words, the 6 dimensions of space: up, down, right, left, front, back, which corresponds to the various spheres. And also you would start to find the germ of time, so to speak, the beginning of the concept of time, which is relevant to the sphere of Malchut. But it's only meta time. It's not time in the real sense of the world and the real sense of the word. Time really begins in the sense of the word as we know it. The limitations of time begin in the world of Asiya, in the world of action, the world of matter, where there's beginnings and ends. There's up, down, right, left, front, back, etc., etc. But there's also the dimension of time is added, where time becomes a constraint, not just a theory. It's an actual existence. Now, I'll just read this saying in case you can't read it for yourselves. Although all of the worlds have the same structure, internal skeleton, so to speak, of 10 spherot, nevertheless, the primary characteristics of each world and what differentiates it from the others is that each world is associated with a particular sphera or cluster of spherot called the Parzuf. The Parzufim describe the relationships between the Sfirot and other Parzufim, rather than just the character of the Sfira. Therefore, The Partsufim are known by their anthropomorphic, human-like, metaphoric parallels. Abba, father, Ima, mother, Zer Anpin, son, Nukva, daughter. The Partsuf is the anthropomorphic representation of a sphere or cluster of spherot that fulfills a certain function described by the Partsuf. For example, the Partsuf of Abba, the sphere of Chochmah, is a role among the spherot, similar to a father's role in the family unit, as we explained before. Partsuf of Ima, like a mother's role in the family unit, and so on. Each of the Partsufim and each of the levels of soul called consciousness is dominant in a different world, and we will now discuss the levels of consciousness that correspond to the world and the Partsuf and the Sphira that is associated with that particular Partsuf. So the highest world, as we said before, is the world of Adam Kadmon, right? The world of Adam Kadmon, which is sometimes called Ak, in brief, to save us some breath. Adam Kadmon, Ak. And the level of consciousness or the level of soul that corresponds to Ak is Yechida. There's more than one aspect to Yechida, but the level of consciousness that corresponds to Adam Kadmon is Yechida. And the Partsuf, again, the cluster of Sfirot or the activity associated with that particular Sfira, with that particular Partsuf, is Arich Anpin, the Sfira of Keter. It's the external Sfira of Keter. Okay, so the reason that I say over here primarily the Partsuf of Arich Anpin is because there are other Partsufim in Keter as well. For example, Atik Yoimin, Resha Delois Yada, and various other things. But the Partsuf of Arich Anpin is primarily that which corresponds to the world of Adam Kadmon and to the level of consciousness called Yechida. Again, there's more than one level in Yechida, and corresponding to other aspects of Keter. In any event, the world of Atzilut, I guess this should have been put down to the next page. So the world of Atzilus, or Atzilut, the level of consciousness or the level of soul associated with that is the level called Chaya. And just incidentally, I think we discussed this in one of the previous classes. The idea of Chaya is from the word Chai, meaning life. In other words, that's the essential life of a person. The essential life of a person is the life of his consciousness in the world of Atzilut, the world of Atzilus. What's the world of Atzilus? The world which is experienced as a closeness to God. It's closer and experiences that. In other words, the awareness of God is the hallmark, so to speak, of the level of Chaya, and that, of course, much more as far as Yechida is concerned. Yechida is much more conscious of godliness, but nevertheless, it's conscious of the godliness that is manifested in the world of Atzilus, Chaya, and that's the essential life force of a person. To the extent that the Zohar does not count Chaya and Yechida as two separate issues, but the Zohar simply calls Chaya and Yechida neshama of the neshama of the neshama, the soul of the soul, so to speak. So the corresponding Partsuf is Abba, in other words, Chochmah, the sphere of Chochmah, and the sphere of Chochmah, as we all know, is called in the Zohar, in Tikkunei Zohar, is called Koach Ma, the power of whatness, or let's use another term, the power of, in a sense, nothingness, the power of being non-defined, right? In other words, Chochma, Koach Ma, is the power of Bitul. Bitul is a very important word, particularly Hasidic terminology, which means nullification, self-nullification. In other words, there's no experience of self in the world of Atzilut. How much more so, obviously, in the world of Adam Kadmon, but since the world of Atzilut is an actual world, in other words, it's a manifest world rather than a meta world, therefore, it is worth talking about this concept of self-nullification or nullification in the world of Atzilut. In fact, in order to get to the world of Atzilut, the only way is the path of self-nullification, nullification of ego, so that a person does not identify himself or herself as an individual, separate entity, but identifies themselves essentially with godliness, the godliness as is manifested in the world of Atzilut, and that would be the essential life force, the Chaya, the living life force, the essential life force of a person is what that person really is. That's who he really is. That's what you might call the person's being, essential being. Okay, one level down, the level of Bria, corresponds in soul to the level in the Neshama. Bria, again from the word bara, to create. Bria is already a created world. It's one of the three lower worlds. It's a created world. And the Sphira that corresponds to it, the Partzuf that corresponds to it, is the Partzuf of Ima, mother, and the Sphira of Bina. Bina means essentially understanding. Chokhmah, the previous Sphira, which is in the world of Atzilut, Chokhmah is innovative. Chokhmah is yesh mi'ayin, it comes from nothingness. Whereas Bria is yesh, it is somethingness, but that somethingness is primarily involved in the attempt to intellectualize, to understand, to put into a framework, a mind framework, a mental framework, every aspect of Chokhmah. In other words, Bina is the expansion of Chokhmah. Just as the analogy is usually given like this, just as the father is the one who gives the sperm, and in the sperm, the baby, the potential being that will come out of it is not defined, and it is not it's certainly not extended into limbs and so on and so forth, but it's only in a potential state like a seed of a tree. It may contain the whole power of the tree within it and the power of all the fruits that will come out in the future and so on and so forth. But as it is in the seed, this seed is basically tasteless and formless. Yes, it has a form of its own, but it certainly does not have the form of the tree that will come out later. Similarly, the drop of sperm that will eventually be planted in the mother's womb and grow into a baby does not have the tura, the form of a child, of a person yet. There are no limbs, there's no extension, it's just a drop of life force. Whereas the Partzuf of Ima causes the spark of Chokhmah to grow into a being with its various extensions in time and various extensions in space and eventually in time. So that's the property of Bina. All of these things can be found on our website in greater detail. We're just basically reviewing, glossing over here. Okay, so one world down, another level of consciousness down is the level of Yetzira, and I forgot to write this in over here. This would be Ruach. Oops, Ruach. Okay, Ruach. The level called Ruach. The part of Zer Anpin, in other words, the part of Zer Anpin is the sixth Sfirot, Chesed, Gvura, Teferet, Netzach, Hod, and Yesod. As you can see, Chesed to Yesod. And that Ruach is the emotional aspect of a person, the emotional consciousness, the consciousness of the emotions. Finally, we go down to what happened over here. I didn't put these things in for some odd reason. So let's put them in now. Okay, Nefesh, the part of Nukva. Nukva, the female part of the sphere of Malchut. Nefesh is essentially the life force of the body, the life force of the senses. Okay, so those are the Sfirot and the Partufim that correspond to the four worlds. The world of Atzilut, the five worlds rather, Adam Kadmon, Yechida, Atzilut, Chaya, Bria, Neshama, Yetzira, Ruach, and Asiya, Nefesh. Okay. All right, we're now continuing with the Shaar Hagilgulim. And the next paragraph says as follows. Even though we know that someone might be the lowest level of the world of Asiya, Malchut of Asiya, which is the lowest sphera, the lowest level of the world of Asiya. Again, all of the worlds have all of the 10 sphirot in them. That's their internal structure, and Malchut of Asiya would be the lowest level of Asiya. Yesod Asiya, and other people maybe from the Sod, the level of Yesod, the next sphere up in the world of Asiya. Nevertheless, even though a person might be from Malchut or from Yesod or from Chesed, from Gura, whatever it might happen to be of that particular world, nevertheless he has to rectify the entire world. Only afterwards can he acquire the next level up, the level of Ruach from the world of Yetzirah, as he goes on to explain. Only afterwards can he, once he's rectified the world of Asiya, rectified all of the sphirot of the world of, in other words, all of his soul powers in Asiya, only then can he be worthy of the world of Yetzirah. Why? Because the world of Yetzirah transcends and it's much greater than, in terms of its light, in terms of its energy, in terms of its power, etc., than the entire world of Asiya. Similarly, in order to achieve the level of Neshama, Nishmato, Hashem in Abriya, which corresponds to the world of Briya, as we know, he has to rectify all of the aspects of Ruach, which is in the world of Asiya. In other words, all that level of consciousness, the consciousness of the world of Yetzirah, has to be rectified. The emotional consciousness has to be rectified before a person can get to the world of Yetzirah, the world of Bria, and the next level of soul up, called Neshama, or the level of consciousness called Neshama. Only after that can a person receive Neshama from the world of Bria. It's not sufficient for a person just to fix that one particular place where his soul is from. Let's say the person is from Chesed of Yetzirah, and he rectifies Chesed of Yetzirah completely. In other words, he rectifies the emotion of love and the emotion of kindness completely in the world of Yetzirah. It's not enough. He has to rectify all of the aspects of the world of Yetzirah in order to rise up to the world of Bria. So again, lo yaspik, it's not sufficient. Kashi yitake and makom prati, when you just fixed up this one aspect, shebo necha shurish nishmase, where the root of his soul is pegged, so to speak, where it's grasped. Shebo necha is shurish nishmato. Tzarich yitake kenizkar, he has to rectify all of the levels, ad she'ero yilchol asiya, until he has adopted, so to speak, is worthy of the entire world of Asiya, and then he can move up to the world of Yetzirah. And then he can begin to grasp Ruach, the level of Ruach, in the world of Yetzirah. The consciousness, the level of consciousness called Ruach in the world of Yetzirah. And similarly with all of the world. And the explanation of this follows: person has to occupy himself with fulfilling Torah and performing the mitzvot, the commandments. In other words, with studying on the proper level, as appropriate for that particular person, appropriate for that particular level, because it's the levels of understanding Torah as well, corresponding to Pshat, Remez, Drush, Sod, etc. The 5 levels of interpretation of the Torah. Torah mitzvot, a person has to occupy himself with Torah and mitzvahs, that level of Torah which corresponds to and is of the level of Asiya. It's not going to help if he just rectifies the place where his soul has its root in the world of Asiya. He has to do the whole world of Asiya. and that is fulfilling all of the mitzvahs and all of the Torah that a person is able to fulfill in this world. Okay, I think we're going to stop here. Again, my apologies that the classes are not live at the moment. I'm doing them this in the morning because it's usually when I feel a bit better. But hopefully in the future, maybe in a month or two, I'll be able to go back to the live classes. I also wanted to thank those people for their very kind words and their very kind prayers on my behalf. And of course, to those who have very generously and very kindly supported me, supported this channel. Of course, it's always voluntary, but if anyone would be interested in helping out, it would be much appreciated. And you can get hold of me by writing to Kabbalah Decoded at gmail.com. That's one word, Kabbalah, Kabbalah, decoded at gmail.com. Or you can go to the website and there is a buy me a coffee pin over there. Or you can donate in various other ways if you get hold of me. I would really appreciate it, but it is not expected, nor is it a precondition for joining these classes. So I'll see you all next time around. There will not be a class tonight, but I do hope to record something perhaps on Friday regarding the coming Jewish New Year and what the New Year holds for us. I hope I'll be able to get to it by Friday and post it again on YouTube online. Okay, all the best, my friends, and see ya as soon as possible. Thank you again.